am back with another episode of Peerless Gamer, or Lumina Aegis, as we follow James and Slick as they continue their way through Zinnia's complex. Zinnia is the person that we found that needs a little rescuing, is currently an AI, and we're trying to figure out what Zinnia's function is with regard to the complex, but we know enough to know that they need help, and we're going to help them out. So, as a on the side, what we learned in the last episodes were that ships are repaired and on their way to what Zinnia was showing as a black hole, but did not. There was enough data for them to analyze and realize that it wasn't really a black hole, it was something else. So there's at least 3 ships that are corporate ships, heading to what used to be the center of the black hole, and we are trying to make a speedy getaway after we recover Zinnia, whatever Zinnia is. Currently, Zinnia's way we talk with Zinnia is in a holographic form, so we're a little unaware of what Zinnia is or what their function was in the complex. We know that Zinnia has limited access to a good portion of the complex, but haven't exactly figured out what they're for yet. So I think the last episode we left James and Slick with a close encounter. They found their first alien. Unfortunately, that alien was dead just outside the control room that they were using to see what was going on. They know that this is a massive complex. They know that there is a hallway, and they're in a lift, an elevator, if you will, that is moving in a direction down, they believe. In this world, in this complex, it could be in any one of, could be upways and sideways, if you want to use Willy Wonka's terminology there, upways and sideways and downways and upways and whatever. So it is moving in a direction that I think I believe Zinnia used their AI technology they're in a lift, and they are moving themselves to wherever the alien had come from. Zinnia had taken and replicated the hand control. So I think what we're going to find out when we get to this point is what was the alien doing here? Slick and James are a little, I think they were in a bit of shock about finding something that isn't human, or isn't an AI, or isn't a robot. But I think time is of the essence. So, it's going to be one of those things that after they get through all of this, they're going to decompress and they're going to go, holy crap. And there may be more of those creatures or aliens or people or whatever they are in a compound. We will have to find that out. So the play screen is up. I think we will get rid of the audio here, or the audio source anyway, for now. And so I think the last where we left them was they were moving down after Zinnia had activated the lift, the moving, people moving thing. In this case, may not be an elevator. And they're moving in a direction. In this case, what I'd like to do is wherever this elevator ends will be what I consider a waypoint in the area. So what I want to do at this point is I think we want to explore the waypoint when we get there. And what I'll do is I will probably roll, let me see, we got some 2d10 and a d6. There we go. And what we'll do is we'll make a discovery. Because at this point it'll be like, what are we going into? So it was a tunnel, there was nothing you could see. We just saw the people mover was moving down through a shaft, if you will, very much like a freight elevator or something like that. You can hear it moving, you can hear the sound of something humming, like something's powering it. There's lights in the elevator. There might be a slight gap between the lift and the wall. The wall it's unadorned. It's kind of, I would say, off gray. And so it's not glass or anything like that where you can see out. There are a set of doors that go by every once in a while. And so we're heading down, and that is all of a sudden there's a stop, right? The door stops because that's apparently where the alien came from. So Zinnia says, looks around, reads the readout on the screen, because as we found out, I don't think she can translate that into human common or galactic common that we know of. And she says, this is deck. What kind of deck would it be? It would be, how would the aliens do it? Would it be so Zinnia says that this is, she said, if I translate this to human common, it's the laboratory deck. And James and Slick they look at one another, and James asks Zinnia, he says, is this place safe? Before we go out there, is there anything that we need to know about? Is there any security systems that we might be needing to be aware of? Dr. Osric is there as well, because he was with them in the control room, and he's not a fighter, right? And he's the way I think of him is Dr. Venture with the beard, some glasses, no mustache, that kind of thing. Very Dr. Venture is the first thing I thought of with the lab coat. And maybe I'll put something up here for that. So Zinnia says, I can go out and look before we go in, and you see her, basically blip out, and we wait for a few minutes, and then Zinnia blips back into the area, and she has a kind of a blue light, so a blue halo or aura is around her, because that's just how hard light works. And she says there's nothing there. It appears to be some camera systems, but there's no drones or anything. You know what? Let's retcon that. What I want to do is I want to make a discovery. So we're going to use Zinnia to make the discovery. So we're going to roll that D100, and we'll use the table to make the discovery table here, right up here. And so let's roll on that. So we'll ignore the D6 for now, and we'll just use the percentile die. So we have a 0-4. Okay, advanced technology. Our salvage. Okay. Well, that's a gimme, isn't it? All right. Well, okay. So she says that yes, this is the laboratory, if that's so, if you choose. And she says that there are a number of labs in this area. And James says, well, time is of the essence, so we kind of need to find wherever you're located. Are you on this deck? And because we would just like to be able to make a quick and hasty exit. Yes, and I'm on this deck. I'm on the other end of the deck. And so James says, well, open the door and let's get out here. I think Dr. Osric is trying to piece together. I think what he's doing is he's trying to piece together some of the language, because this is ancient artifacts. I mean, the language might be helpful for future research and what have you. So he's got a tricorder because his blew up, if you remember, because he tried to scan something. But he's doing passive scans with video, and he got the label that said this is the laboratory deck. So he can read that later. But he's trying to take advantage of whatever writing is available. James and Slick, Slick is, I would say she's got a baton or some kind of pipe wrench or something like that, in keeping with the trope of being the mechanic. So she's got her mechanic's tools, but she's never without her trusty wrench. And James probably has a I want to say he's probably got either I don't want to say a sword because that sounds a little weird and a little anachronistic. He might have a kind of weapons would they have? I know they have pistols, but they loathe to use them on ships because, you know, holes in hulls make for bad days. He might have something that's electromagnetic, right? So he might have a slug thrower or something like that that's electromagnetic that will shoot pellets, small bead-like pellets or something like that that can be accelerated. And then he might have some kind of weapon like a ball bat or a wrench or pipe or something like that. You know, most humans will get hurt by a pipe or, you know, the slug thrower or something like that. The other thing is the slug thrower doesn't require oxygen to initiate the shot. So you don't have to worry about bullets or anything like that with oxidizer or whatever. So James and them walk out, and I almost want to like have a map or something of this. When you set it to auto, you know, pin itself to the wall or to the sides there, you run into issues. So we're gonna say that this is the. Oh wait, where's the? There we go. We're gonna do that. All right. So this is, imagine if you will, this is, you know, where they come out at. This is the, you know, and I'm going to say because this is originally, if you listen to the previous episodes, it was a 12-sided die, right? It's a dodecahedron. So it's a 12-sided die. It looks like this one right here, roughly. So I'm going to say that it is a circular kind of thing. Apologies, I am doing this with a trackball, and I don't have my surface with me to draw any prettier, and I did not get an art degree. So what I'm going to say is they come out of the elevator, and there might be a small, you know, hallway, for instance, and I would say in the interest of it being a laboratory, like most buildings have labels for things, right? So what you might find right here is a sign. You're going to find a sign right there with words and characters on it. Of course, Dr. Osric, he's taken visual images of it and asking Zinnia what it's for. And Zinnia says, okay, so this is... How many entries are there? I'm gonna say there's a D10 number of entries on the board. So it might be like, you know, this direction might be a distance kind of thing. I would also say that this is large enough that there's probably some kind of conveyance, like there might be chairs or there might be something that once investigated, they're going to be able to go around faster to be able to get where they need to go. Maybe there's no gravity in this area. Maybe that affects the gravity in this area. So when they get here, they'll be able to latch on, kind of like on some of the ships that rotate. You know, as you get closer to the core. I've been reading The Expanse, so forgive me, but there is artificial gravity in places, which is miraculous enough for James and them to not even realize, to not even take note. But because they're using magnetic boots. Okay, we're going to retcon that. They're still using their magnetic boots, like The Expanse. So when they get there, they're gonna realize there's. Okay, so one second. Okay, so the first die 10 is going to be the number that we use to say how many entries there are on the sign. There are. Dear God, thankfully that is not a roll that I'm going to be worried about. So there's 10 entries. So what you see is, you know, maybe it's 5 in each direction. So it's like, you know, they're trying to show you the closest way. So if you go back over here, there might be, you know, you're going to have one, kind of like a spoke on a wheel. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So there's 10 things, right? And some of these may be laboratories, some of them may be corridors that go to other areas, and that's what Zinnia will try to explain to us. So or Zinnia says that they are in, actually, technically there's 11 then, so there's 10 plus this entry here. So there's 11 corridors out of this circle, and there's probably, I think James will ask, well, how many floors are there? And there might be a helpful panel right here that tells you, actually, you know what? The sign is interactive, right? So they all walk up and they touch the sign, and the one thing that they do notice is there's atmosphere here. There's oxygen. So James and them look at the output on the screen, and you see various characters that don't make any sense. Dr. Osric is making notes as he goes along in his tricorder for all intents and purposes for visual inspection. It might look like a phone or something like that. It's small, but it's handheld, so you can do things and take notes. And he's thinking, oh yes, blah blah blah. And it's got his AI on it, and they're talking, and he's asking her to start trying to decipher any and all video recordings of any glyphs or whatever writing this is, to kind of help in the future if they find any more of these vaults or these like precursor vaults or whatever. Zinnia says, I'm in the following lab. So let's see. You might actually see a visual representation of this donut, if you will. So okay, so she says, I'm in lab number 2, or I'm in area number 2, which is right here. James and Dr. Odrick and Slick are looking at these things, and they're seeing distances, and Zinnia says, well, this one is roughly what you would consider to be 3 kilometers away. And because, this is a vast area, right? This is as big as a city or something like that. So you have to recognize that, this might be, the width of this dodecahedron or this 12-sided She's like, it's 3 kilometers away. So we can assume, given that this is, assuming this is a circle, this would be, that far. And she says that there's only one way to get there. That is the shortest. And so, there's other stuff in here. So this may reach down into an area, and this may be there may be other labs inside the interior as well as the exterior. So there might be it's very much spoke-like, and they try from what James and them have seen, that they're trying to make the most of the internal space, right? And so you see like another internal circle right here. So it does very much look like a donut, right? And James points to the circle and says, what is that? And Zinnia says, that is the power source for this facility. And James says, is there any way to get to it? And Zinnia says, I believe there is, but why? And I think James is trying to hatch a plan. I say think because even I don't know what the plan is at this point, which is part of the fun, right? Ideally, James is thinking of the power core in terms of either being able to shut it down, or maybe there's an opportunity to get rid of the facility when they're done. In that case, maybe there's a possibility there. There may be some other solutions in one of these mini labs that are in here. So James says, if there's anything you can tell us about the power core on the way to where you're located, please feel free to fill us in. So Zinnia says that the power core is based on a singularity, not unlike the one that was being emulated by the facility up until the point that James and them figured out that that's not a thing. Technically, there still is a singularity going on, but the charade is no longer there. It does create a gravitational field, hence the idea that there's a gravitational field, but it's being held in place with. She stops for a second and she says, "Quantum filaments." That's the nearest translation I have for what that technology is. And Dr. Osric is like, "My God, you've contained a black hole. That would be amazing. Is there anything else here that we should know about?" Because it feels like this place is far too valuable to be in the hands of Atwell Industries or whoever is coming here. Is there anything we can do to make sure that they can't get access to this? This could change the course of humanity. This should be studied. But what can we do to make sure that they can't get their hands on this and salvage it? I mean, technically, we're the first ones here, but obviously we're not the first ones here, as we saw. And Zinnia says there may be some way of shutting down the system. This place was apparently used for science, but we're I'm going to assume at this point they're about halfway to Station 1. There may be a way to address that, right? Dr. Osric and Slick and James are at lab or station or intersection 1, and James says, "What is this?" And it says genetics, genetic testing, and James and them are like, okay, right. So they keep going, and Slick is I think in awe of the thought, the technology. She says, "I'd love to get down into the engineering spaces of this place and see what it's really like. If the control room is anything like that, we could spend our entire lives studying this place and still never learn every secret that it has." So yeah, I'm assuming it's probably about the circle, at least this part, and let's assume that this is like the middle of the area, so it's at its widest point. I would say it's probably about 20 kilometers. It would take a little bit to get there, but so yeah, and to be fair, they're floating along, they're propelling themselves, because there's no gravity in the area, so they've turned off their boots. They find that it's probably faster and easier to glide around to glide to the next area. So they're pushing themselves off and they're trying to not crash into things. At a good clip, I would say it probably takes them about 15 minutes to get to the second intersection, and allows them to slow themselves down and so they don't crash into something or fly past it, that kind of thing. They reactivate their boots, round about this area here, and they see it says robotics. That's what Zinnia says, robotics. And James looks at Slick, and Slick looks at James, and Slick is excited. And they start to make their way. Do they go left or right? She says, because it is a circle, so there could be labs over here. There could be labs over here. I'm going to retcon that a little bit. I said it was over here, but being a donut, I'm assuming there's concentric circles or what have you. So do they go left or right, even or odd? That way, in the past couple of episodes, I've kind of pooched it right there. So we're going to use the die 6, and we're just going to roll evens or odds. If it's odds, it's okay. It's odds. So the lab is this direction towards the core. of the building, of the compound, a complex. So they walk down and there's a door. I want to say something happens here, right? So something happens. I want to set like a, I want to explore this waypoint, right? So we're exploring, this will be another waypoint, right? So we're going to explore the waypoint. This would be a notable location, I would say. So let's roll and see what we get. Roll our wits. So we, oh crap. Our wits are 2. You know what I'm going to burn? I'm going to burn some momentum. If anybody has any thoughts on a better mapping tool, it is free and allows one to, all right, so we're going to burn some momentum. So I'm going to drop 2 momentum, and that will give us a 5 plus our wits is 2, and that makes it a 9. So we have a strong hit, and we may make a discovery. All right. So we're going to envision a favorable insight, situation, resource, or encounter, and then we're going to take plus 2 momentum. So we got our 2 momentum back, right? Weird. I didn't plan for that. I actually didn't read the strong hit bit, so that's good. So we got our 2 momentum back from that, which is cool. All right, go back up 2. We took 2 to take 2, or take 2 to get 2. All right, so yeah, you may make a discovery. All right, so we're going to roll again, and I actually want something bad to happen right now. Just because it was a strong hit doesn't mean it's good, right? So, 6, Jesus. Oh, actually, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, all right, so as they come around the corner, as they are about to touch the door, where this is, you hear a message, or no, wait. It's not a message. You hear something. I'm imagining it's like a shriek. And it's like, sorry about the facial gestures, but. And it's loud, right? It's loud. James and them, they got their ears, their head over their ears, and they say, you know, they're yelling to Zinnia, "What the hell is that noise? You know, what the hell is that thing?" And you know, because they're like right here. I'd say this little red squiggle is the party, and you see Zinnia, she tries to say something, but it's so loud, and they have their ears over their hands over their ears that they can't hear it. Zinnia stands there for a second, listening to the noise, and it's so alien that it doesn't even, it doesn't feel like it's repeating, or you know, it just keeps going and going, but it's just like there's no end, right? And Zinnia goes over, and there's the door, and the door that they saw before they walked up was, you know, it's like a, you know, they can see it. Actually, it doesn't slide like this. The way it looks is it's like this, and it's a really heavy door, like a really, I'm imagining like, you know, the blast doors from the Death Star, you know, it was like, open the blast doors, and it's like a really heavy, like, door, kind of like the cargo bay doors on Star Trek. Ah, there you go. These. It's kind of like a very heavy door looking like this thing, where it's like, you know, you can definitely tell it's shut. And Zinnia walks up to the door. So Zinnia's walking up to the door, and James and them, it's starting to feel somewhat painful, right? And Zinnia says, she actually says something, but you hear it screech very similar to that. Does the voice stop? And I'm gonna say 50 or less. I'm gonna say 50 or less that it does. 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 Okay, so it does not. the voice continues, or the screeching still continues. And can James or Slick or Dr. Osric, they've got their ears covered, but can they tell where the noise is coming from? Is there a speaker or something? I'm gonna say with technology like this, it's unlikely, but I will see 25 or less. They find something. 25 or less. Damn. So close. James says to Zinnia, he yells to her, "Can you do anything about the message?" And Zinnia, obviously he can't hear her because he's got so she turns into like a screen, if you will. She says on the screen, "No, I tried telling it who I was, but it wouldn't stop." And James yells, "What does the message say? What is the message saying? Can you understand it?" And she says, the voice it's a warning. Is it a warning? Do we want it to be a warning? Maybe it's something else. I mean, there's a reason why there would be a voice that would come up, an archive or a message as they're coming up to the door, right? Okay, so I'm gonna make a mechanic here. So what I'm gonna say is 100 is like direst of like warnings, the worst, the most dire warning ever. And then number 1 will be like the most innocuous, but it could be about the door. It could be about what's inside. It could be about intruder alert. It could be, anything. So once we figure out what type of message it is, if it's informational or if it's like the most direst of warnings. Okay. So that is an 82. So it's not the absolute worst, but it's probably pretty bad. All right. So according to that, so she says, Zinnia says that up on the screen, and of course, Dr. Osric is recording this later for posterity. It's not about the door, and it's not about what's behind the door. There's an alert, right? So this is probably about the time that those ships that repaired themselves, and I think that's where we're going to go with this, that this is the alert saying perimeter has been breached. There was a similar alarm. She says there was a similar alarm that went off when your ship approached as well. James and them say, "Is there anything you can do to turn the message off?" She says, "I've already tried. I'm going to see if I can disrupt the power in the corridor." So we're going to give that a shot. So we're going to give that, I would say she's got some limited ability to, affect the station. So I'm going to say probably, 60 or less. 60 or less, she can turn it off. 60 or less, she can turn it off. 60 or less. Okay, so 50. There we go. 50 or less. 60 or less in this case. So she stands there, and you see her image blur a little bit, and then the whole corridor goes dark, and the alarm goes off. But it's really localized, so you can't hear it here, but you can definitely still hear it in the background, and maybe down the hallway or in other places where there's still power, right? Because this is a ship-wide alert, if you will. So James says, "Is that permanent, or are we going to have to worry about some other stuff?" And she's like, Zinnia says, I think we're going to be okay for now." And James says, "Well, what the hell was that about again?" And she says, "There's been a perimeter breach of the outer defensive area, being the circle, right? The plasma that's around the station. It's very similar. It is the same alarm that we got when the Deliverance and us came to the station." James says, "Is there anything you can do to hold them off?" at this point. And Zinnia says Zinnia has access to modify the gravity, which caused the accretion disk, right? Let's say she sent messages before, right? So James says, you sent messages before. Could you send some kind of stay away message or intimidation message, like this facility is to self-destruct or something like that? Can she do that? I'm going to say it's 60 or below again. 60 or below is a success. 85. Damn. Okay. She said the reason that she sent the message the way she did to Dr. Manand and them was coded because she couldn't directly send the message like that, right? James says, could you send yourself? Because you did send yourself to us on the Deliverance. Is there anything you can do to send yourself to one of the ships to intimidate or communicate that directly? Is there a reason why she couldn't? I don't think so. James says, while we're figuring this out, we need to get this door open. Can we open the door now? And Zinnia says, I can attempt to do that. Let me see if I can do that. I'm going to say it's going to be 75 or below, because I think she can send it. I don't think they have energy shields or anything like that in this kind of technology yet. So I'm going to say that they can. Oh, wow. 75 or below, and I got exactly 75. So I was reading that on a match, envision an extreme result or twist. Wow. What does that look like? Okay, so wow, I got a 75 or lower. So she says, let me give it a shot. And so you see her stand still and she blips out of existence. Whatever light was in the corridor is now gone. So James grabs a flashlight, turns it on, very similar to the Mulder and Scully flashlights that they had when they landed here with the Wild Deliverance. And he says, Slick, there must be any good design in a structure has a manual release on a door. Is there any way we can find that? And Slick's like, I'm on it. So Slick is over there. Doc, maybe you can help me out here. So they're looking for a panel, and James says, I think James wants to help them in this case. So let me see, where is aid your ally? There we go. So envision how you aid them, then secure an advantage or gain ground to take an action. Okay, so we're going to secure an advantage here. We're going to assess a situation or attempt to gain leverage through strength, endurance, or aggression. I would say expertise, focus, or observation, which is a wits. So we're going to roll that. Okay, 5, 3, 2. All right, so our wits is 5, so we could burn another momentum, which I think we will. I'll burn another momentum because we've got plenty of it right now. Remind me again when we have 0 momentum. And get a strong hit. And so, okay, well, we're gonna get that momentum back. I totally forgot about that. All right, so we're going to add 1 to our next move, not a progress move. We're going to, there was a panel or something on the wall very similar to when the lift was activated. They pull that back, and so +1 on our next move. Okay, so by helping them and saying, hey, there's, go and get the wall panel. It may not be the way you do it, but we're going to go for that for now. We are going to, I wish there was like an analyzer, gather information. So we're going to get a +1 to our gather information. All right, we get a +1 for this, and we're going to search for clues. All right, so we're going to gather information based on the work that Slick and Osric are doing to find a manual release for the door. And we get a +1 to this, and it's our wits. So we get a +3. +3. All right, so we need a 1 + 3 is 4. You know what? I'm gonna call that. I'm gonna call that as it is. I'm not gonna use any more momentum. So we get a weak hit. The information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, and then take a +1 momentum. Okay, so I'd say they find the release, but they're going to need. I'm imagining a lever or something that they can use to open the door. Okay, so instead of finding a manual release, they don't find anything. That's the complication. They don't find a manual release. Maybe they're so technologically advanced that maybe James is wrong. You know, maybe they don't have a manual release, or maybe, so I think they're going to have to attempt to pry the door open, unless they can get power back to the corridor. Now let's assume that this has happened within about less than a minute. Okay, so they're doing their search. Dr. Osric and them are trying to figure out how to get the door open. Maybe they can try to pry the door open. I'm going to say that they're going to. How do you? That's the problem. It's like how do you make that action, right? How do you make it so that you're going to open a door, or you're going to do an action like that? That would be an action. Okay, I'm going to say, because in this case we're moving towards an objective, which is we're trying to rescue Zinnia. The gain ground action is to take action in a fight. In this case, the fight would be we're attacking the door, right? The door is the obstacle that we're attacking to move toward an objective, right? Or, in an action to fight to move toward an objective. So in this case, the door is an obstacle in the, it'd be like a hench person, and you're trying to get to the treasure chest or whatever behind. You have to fight the door. You have to fight the henchman to get through. So, all right, this is one of those things where if I get a hit again on a strong hit, I can get 2 momentum. So if I can burn 2 or more momentum to get 2 back, I will do so. All right, so we're going to gain some ground. We're going to attempt to force the door open. And I think we're going to use strength on this, or iron, right? Gaining leverage with force, powering through, or making a threat. So we're going to do iron. So I'm going to open that. Okay, iron is 1. Okay, so that sucks, right? Oh, but it's not too bad. So we have 1. Iron is 1. So let's, we're going to burn another one. We're going to burn 1. So we're going to get 2 back, so we can have a proper hit. So boom, now we're going to go back. We're going to have a strong hit. They succeed in prying the door open, or at least opening the door enough that they can look in. And in this case, James and okay, so did the lab have atmosphere? Is the lab safe? Because we don't have Zinnia here to figure out if the lab is safe or if there's anything behind there. So we're going to gather information about what's going on back behind there. So let's gather information, because we're basically looking through the crack in the wall. And that's assuming, if this goes terabad, which it's not good. But, so our wits is 2, so that's 6. Okay, so weak hit. I'm going to call it a weak hit, because we're, I can burn momentum all day and get strong hits. I mean, I could do that, but it feels a little cheating, right? I mean, I've banked this enough. And if I do another strong hit, then I get the 2 momentum back anyway. So, well, I do have to burn how much? How much do I have to burn? Let's see. 4, 2 for the wits is 6. 6. Need 4. I could burn 4. Okay, well, you know what? We'll burn 4. We'll burn 4. Because then we get 2 back. Because we get a strong hit, right? It really pays to have your wits as high as you can get them, right? I picked heart for number 3, but if you add wits as a 3 on this game, you're doing pretty good. Especially, it depends on how your approach to things are. So gathering information. They crack the door open, but I would say immediately something billows out. Like it's like it's a fog, right? It's a fog. Can we breathe? Is there atmosphere? You don't know. Galaxy of Quest reference there. So we're gonna say 50 or below. 50 or below. Okay. Ooh, that sucks. Okay. So they open the door. It's a fog. It's a foggy like area. They can't. There's light, right? But it's like through a fog, right? So it's diffuse. It's almost like a cloudy day. The gas or the fog in there is somewhat of a greenish color. James and Slick and Dr. Osric immediately start coughing and hacking because it's not oxygen. Yeah, I would say it's like, I think for this, I don't think it will matter much. It's just a gas that is harmful or will cause them issues. It's not oxygen-based gas, so it's not regular atmosphere. It would be, something that you definitely don't want to breathe in, like a heavy nitrogen atmosphere. I mean, we got a lot of nitrogen in our atmosphere. 79% of it is nitrogen. 19 or 20% is oxygen. But in this case, it is the wrong atmosphere for humans. Because this is an alien world, right? And Zinnia, to some extent, was handling the atmospherics as we were walking around. So with her gone, there was nobody to check on the other side of the door to see if this was a breathable atmosphere or not. So they open the door, they pry the door open, and this atmosphere starts billowing out. And they're right there in front of the door, coughing and hacking, whatever. And James is like, go ahead, shut the door, shut the door, shut the door. So you see them trying to force the door back closed. Does it close? Or does it close all the way? 50, I would say 50 or lower. Even if I did 25 or lower, then it's still good. I think they're able to shut the door, but I think that there's probably still some leftover atmosphere in the area. So do they have, we're not going to face death. It's not that fucking bad. I mean, it's just like, you know what, I'm going to take some health off for that. So from James, we should assume that each one of them take a bit of health damage as well. James still has some cuts and bruises and damage from when he was fighting the petty officer on the ship, on the corporate ship. So maybe he takes some temporary damage, or they just sit there coughing and hacking. And once they've moved back a little bit from the area where Zinnia has been maintaining the atmosphere in this area, they find it easier to breathe, right? So James is like, what the hell are we going to do? We got to wait for Zinnia to come back. Zinnia. Does Zinnia come back? I would say 75 or lower, because she is fairly aware of the station. She does have a presence there. Okay, yeah, 22. All right, cool. All of a sudden, there's a blip of light about 5 feet from where they were, near the door, and Zinnia says, James, what's wrong? And I think James is, still coughing and hacking a little bit. God damn it. You didn't fix the door on the other side of the lab. And Zinnia's like, I didn't tell you to open the door. I've been a little busy. And James says, okay, fine. So, have you been able to silence the alarm? Is the alarm silent? Maybe they haven't been noticing. Is the alarm silenced? Maybe has the alarm been silenced? I would say 25% or lower. Because the original roll, I didn't set a condition. 0-4. Okay. When they were too busy coughing and hacking and getting, basically deaded because of the atmosphere coming from that lab, Zinnia comes back and she's like, I've been busy, trying to communicate to the ships about that are coming here that they need to stay away. They need to not come here. James says, did you go looking like that? And, to the people on the ship, Zinnia looks like an androgynous human being that isn't very threatening, right? So did Zinnia change her appearance to look something more terrible? I would say, would she have been aware of that? I would say she probably wouldn't have thought about it. I'm going to say 25% or lower that she did make a change to be more intimidating. Yeah, of course not. No. So she went as we see her now, which is the default that we had. And she said, well, I was only there for a couple of minutes, but I was attempting to tell them that it was dangerous to come here, that they shouldn't be there. And I was unsuccessful. Several hours away, but they are within the perimeter. And so then James goes, wait, hold on. There's no sound. There's no alarm coming from the distant corridors that are still powered on. And James says, did you silence the alarm? And Zinnia says, no, I didn't. Somebody had to have acknowledged the alarm from a control room. James says, then we're not alone. There's somebody else in this complex. Can you tell if there's anything happening in the complex that has changed anything? Has anything changed since that time? Zinnia says, well, with what limited information I have, something has changed. Dear Lord, yes, something has changed. Okay. To the best of her abilities and her knowledge of the area, no, she cannot tell anything has changed. Or nothing has happened. James asks, are there weapons on this complex? Guns or lasers or something that can be, used to fight? And Zinnia says, no, there's no weapons. There's no weapons. Well, that really sucks. That really sucks. I think he says, well, since the alarm has gone off, can we repower the hallway? And can you fix the lab? I nearly died when we tried to open the door manually. And Zinnia says, you should have waited for me. And James says, well, we were told of the time was of the essence. So Zinnia repowers the corridor. Can they open the door? Because they had to go look for a manual bit. So I'm going to say it's probably a 20% chance that maybe something got damaged. Anything 20 or lower. Okay. The power comes back on in the hallway. They put away their flashlights and everything. They go up to the door panel, and Zinnia says, well, we can't open the door now with the door panel controls because you broke them. James says, sorry, it's our first time working with an alien door panel. And she says, all right, well, you've managed to open the door manually by prying it open. You can probably do it again. Let me see what I can do about the atmospheric controls in the lab. Going on the premise that somebody acknowledged the control panel or the alarm, something something acknowledged the alarm. I'm going to say, because I work in information security on my off time, that what Zinnia is doing is fairly noisy. The intruder alert has already been hit. There's already a ship that has landed because there is no weapons. They didn't have a way of communicating to the ship at the time, or maybe they didn't want to. I'm going to say it's a 75% chance that they actually can. They're able to detect what's going on. Oh, boy, that was close. That was very close. Okay, so what I'm going to say here is that since this is very, very close to not being able to detect, things are still a little fuzzy. It's like when Zinnia makes changes to the system and atmosphere and whatever, maybe they're almost like malfunctions, and the people in the control room, the thing in the control, or the whatever it is in the control room, or whatever it is that acknowledge the alarm, is uncertain as to why these things are happening. Sounds good. Sounds plausible. So Zinnia is able to modify the atmosphere in the lab. She's like, give it a couple minutes. We got to get all that gas out of there. If you had opened that door fully, you probably would have died. What should we expect in the lab? James says. Because this is robotics. It's a robotics lab. Is there anything in there that could cause us harm? And why was the atmosphere that? Zinnia will know with a 50 or lower. Oh, wow. Okay. So the 02, she said, Zinnia says, that atmosphere is the standard atmosphere for what you would call the aliens that worked in this lab. And James says, are they like the things that we just saw before? The dead thing that you used? And do we want to have multiple alien races, or do we just want to have one? I'm going to go halvesies on this. Halvesies below is yes. Okay, so Zinnia says that would be yes. That would be the atmosphere that alien and that creature, that person. We're gonna have to figure out a better way of not just calling them aliens, because aliens aren't aliens, right? We're aliens to those aliens. Maybe they didn't know that we were actually here. James asks Zinnia, can you detect if there's where those other, where other similar atmospheres are? And Zinnia says 25 below, 25 or below. 25 or below. Ooh, no, she cannot detect within a certain range. So she says, I can't detect any other life forms other than us in a certain range. That's just, maybe that's from, is that from where you're located? Right here in a range? And she says, yes. Another minute or two rolls by. The door opens, or they're able to force the door open enough that they can walk through. And what they see is, and since, the previous alien that we saw was very much like an octopus or had tentacles or what have you, the UI or the lab would be set up for people that had multiple grasping capabilities, right? The ability to manipulate things, fine motor control. Is there any other people in this? Are there aliens in this area? Let's say 25% or lower that yes, there is something here. We're going to gather some information, as a matter of fact. Let's gather information. 5, 2 is a 7. All right, so strong hit. We're back up to 10 momentum. What you see in this room is, I'm going to roll a single die 10. So whichever one is this one right here. What you see is, so there's one life form in this area. or what appeared to be a similar life form to the one before, because it is completely, I'm imagining there's a green smear across the floor. The alien is laying up against the wall, but it looks like it's just been completely pulped, beaten up, and pulped along the wall. So there's a slimy trail of what looks like blood, and it's just up against the wall. It has manipulators on. Looks like it was doing something when it got hit. The other thing we see in the room are several, I could call them robots. They're moving around. I want to say we haven't moved in too far into the room. I would say that they're still being, I want to say that if you want to go down here to call it like this, you've got this area, and it is roughly an oval shape. And there's, there may be a table here and a bench here, and there's displays all over the place. Some of them are broken. Some of them look like they've been broken. But what you see is, I want to say, I'm going to go D6 this time. There's robots, but there's one specific circle right here. And what you see in this circle is it's thrumming. And these robots, or these things, are various sizes. So one maybe, there's like, I would say out of these 6 or 7, I put 6 things up here. Maybe there's a couple more. There's a window here that goes out and looks over the power core. And every Star Wars episode you've ever seen with the climactic battle, you see a huge cylindrical tube in a gigantic hole, and just as an aside, you think about, why did they design it like that? In Scarif for Rogue One, you have a big giant tube with hard drives in it, and they have to play around inside of it. And in the Death Star and in Return of the Jedi, you've got that big giant tube where it leads down into the nuclear fusion reactor. So you see a window that's open, and what you see is across there are other labs, and you see they have lights on. You see they have green. Some there might be a handful of them that have green fog in there, or you might see them with. You see another one, but it doesn't have green fog, so there might be some other stuff there. There might actually be a couple that are dark, like they're nothing in there. But in the middle here, you see this big crystal, and Zinnia says, I'd like to introduce you to me. And she blips away. And I think that's where we're going to stop. Okay, that was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I think we're going to find more as we continue through the corridor here, and I think we'll be pleasantly surprised at the end of the episode here. I think I find that we're getting towards the end, and that we will be able to button this up pretty quickly. As we know, the ships are on their way. Zinnia. We found Zinnia. Zinnia is a gigantic crystal. Weird. And so we'll have to see what comes out of this. If it's even possible to move Zinnia, what it's going to take to make this happen. So hopefully Osric and Slick and Dr. Osric and James are able to be up to the challenge. So hope you like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Come and join our Discord. tell me what you think of the episodes. And yeah, we'll be back with another episode here very soon. Hope you have a good day. Take care of yourselves. And, as we're fond of saying here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you soon.